It definitely was the scariest time that he ever said anything in his sleep. Number 2. I was told by my significant other that I said, "Give her a lobotomy right through the temple." Number 3. My significant other said one night, "Shh, be quiet. She'll hear us." I ask who. They respond, "The woman who lives here. Shh. She's in the hallway." Number 4. One night, in my sleep, I sat up at a 90-degree angle and said, "Violence causes and solves all problems." I laid back down and said nothing else. Number 5. One night I woke up to go to the bathroom. As I moved to get up, my boyfriend says, "Don't go out there." Thinking that he's awake and joking with me, I go, "Oh yeah, why?" He sits upright, eyes wide open, looks me in the face and says, "She's out there." I held it for the rest of the night. Number 6. I woke up in the middle of the night to my significant other shouting, "Where is the head? Where is the head?" Number 7. My boyfriend woke up in the middle of the night one night and started chanting, "They're coming for my skin. They're coming for my skin. They're coming for my skin." Number 8. I talk in my sleep, and my girlfriend told me this story after we woke up. I had evidently turned toward her, shook her with my face, and yelled, "They took my goddamn arms, Johnny. They took my goddamn arms," before slumping back over. Number 9. My friend's mother used to talk in her sleep frequently. Apparently she was petting her boyfriend's hair and telling him all the ways that she could kill him and make it look like an accident. He told her about it in the morning, and she just laughed and said they weren't bad ideas. Number 10. My wife has the occasional night terrors. One night she woke up screaming, thinking something was in the corner of our room. It really freaked me out, because I woke up to her trying to escape through the wall while pulling her lamp from the socket and throwing everything off of her nightstand. My dog and I just looked at her super confused. The dog ran out of the bedroom and slept in the guest room that night. Number 11. My boyfriend has PTSD from his time in the Marines and what they did overseas. The other night, I had my arm around his waist, and he patted my hand and said in his sleep, "You're never going to make it out of here. You're just another casualty about to happen. You're going to die." Number 12. One night, my girlfriend looked at me in the middle of the night and said in her sleep, "I want to tear all the skin off your body. Then maybe you'll be quiet." Number 13. My stepfather one night in his sleep shouted, "I will kill you, you bastard." Number 14. A few months ago, My husband was mumbling in his sleep. I asked what he was doing, and he replied very clearly and loudly, "A corridor of severed heads." I slept on the couch that night. Number 15. The first time we ever slept together, I woke up to him looking at me and said, "Hand me my spear. I will kill you now." Then he closed his eyes and went back to sleep. I thought about it for about 5 minutes, deciding I could take him, and then went back to sleep myself. We were together for 6 years. Number 16. One night, my husband sat up in bed, pointed to the darkest corner of the room, and said, "There's someone there." I frantically said, "What do you mean?" And he insisted, There's someone standing right there." He then proceeded to lay down and go back to sleep as I used my phone light to check the dark corner. There was no one there. Number 17. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night to my girlfriend saying, "He's still watching us. He has no eyes." Well, so much for sleeping that night. Number 18. One night he said to me, "They're out there," with his eyes closed. "Who?" I asked. He shrugged and used both of his hands to gesture to the dark window. "Them. We have had people in our yard before, so I went to look. There was no one there." Number 19. I woke up in the middle of the night and heard my boyfriend mumbling. It was incoherent, and then all of a sudden the words were distinct. He said, "Sudden infant death syndrome." I was 7 months pregnant at the time. Number 20. My husband almost every night yells out, "Help! Help! Help!" in his sleep. If I wake him when he does it, he's hysterical until I can calm him down. It's absolutely crazy. He can never remember what he's dreaming about. Number 21. In the middle of the night, she looks at me and says, "Don't move, or they will get you." The next morning, she says she doesn't remember her dream. Number 22. Soon after having a child, my wife sat upright in bed in the middle of the night and shouted, "My baby, what has she done?" and then laid back down. Number 23. In the middle of the night, I woke up and my girlfriend was staring at me, her eyes wide open. She said, "Don't worry about the lady in the corner of the room." Number 24. When we first got together, my soon-to-be ex-significant other would scream at his ex-wife in his sleep, saying things like, "I should kill you." Number 25. This wasn't a significant other, but a guy that I had a fling with. He abruptly began speaking guttural gibberish in his sleep, and then in his guttural voice shouted, "I saw him," then continued the gibberish. Think straight up horror movie demon voice. I think the devil took over his body for a moment. Number 26. My ex used to grind her teeth, lot while sleeping. One night she was making this weird noise with her throat, and me, being a light sleeper, woke up and decided I was going to get up and go to the bathroom, when she suddenly snapped her neck and turned her face toward me and said real quick, "The witch has arrived," and then turned her face away just as fast and stopped moving. I spent the whole night laying down wide awake. I swear I almost pissed myself. Number 27. My husband frequently sees things in our room in his sleep that are not there. Giant spiders on the wall, snakes, squirrels. He'll wake up and tell me to get out of bed so he can find whatever it is he saw. One time he jumped out of bed and looked under the bed for snakes. My favorite was when he pointed in the corner of our bedroom and said there was a giant spider. He then proceeded to run out of the bedroom yelling, "I am out of here." Number 28. In a cabin in the middle of nowhere, suddenly in the middle of the night, my significant other says in her sleep, "We're not alone." We were 100 miles deep into pure wilderness. Number 29. My significant other has laughed in his sleep. It doesn't seem creepy, but when you're sleeping in a dark and quiet room and wake up to someone cackling, creepy is an understatement. Number 30. One night, my husband repeatedly screamed, "Get them off of me!" while biting his own arms. It was alarming, to say the least. Number 31. I'm not sure what's more terrifying than your significant other sitting upright and saying, "They are here," only to collapse back into their deep slumber. Number 32. Waking up in the middle of the night and having him looking into my eyes and then saying, "I am going to kill you." Number 33. My significant other used to speak German in his sleep, so since I understand very little German, I would catch a few words here and there and ask in the morning. It usually was something like "run" or "kill," etc. He had the strangest dreams, or nightmares, I guess. Number 34. I talk in my sleep. My boyfriend is weirded out by it. One night, I sat up and creepily whispered in his ear, "Help me." Number 35. My husband kissed my forehead one night and then said, in a really creepy sing-song voice, "They're coming. The terrorists are coming. Don't worry, though. They won't eat you." Number 36. One night, my husband violently shakes me awake. "Don't move. Do not move." Then he whispers, "We are covered in bees. Stay very still," and then turns over and is silent. Number 37. My brother and I shared a room growing up. I would always wake him up with my sleep talking, so he convinced my dad to record me in my sleep. I said one very clear and loud sentence that night: "Go until you die." No clue what I was dreaming about. Number 38. My ex once asked me in her sleep, "Do you see them?" I whispered, "Who?" And then she responded, "The children." Number 39. This wasn't talking in your sleep, but laughing. My husband has, on more than one occasion, laughed in his sleep. But it's not a normal laugh. It's either a lot deeper or slower, almost insidious, or it's a higher pitch, sometimes up and down rapidly with the pitch. Neither laugh sounds like him when he's awake. It's unsettling, but fortunately, it doesn't happen that often. Number 40. I had an ex-girlfriend whose first language was Welsh. When she spoke in her sleep, she sounded like she was speaking in tongues. Number 41. She didn't 100% talk in her sleep, but one night, she was stressed and she had dreams about spiders crawling everywhere. One night I was reading, and she suddenly sat up and just stared at me. I asked her what was up. She said, "The spiders." "What spiders?" I asked. "There are spiders coming out of the poster." "There are no spiders," I responded. She stares at the poster on the wall. "No, the spiders." "Go back to sleep," I said. Then she collapsed back into her pillow, back asleep. When she first sat up and stared at me, I thought this was suddenly a horror movie, and I was dead. Number 42. My wife doesn't talk in her sleep, but I did wake up once to her sitting up, leaning over me, and staring at me Paranormal Activity style. It was terrifying, and she has no recollection of it. I guess she was asleep, but it only happened once. Number 43. My fiancée is Chinese and didn't have the best upbringing. It is common for her to yell in a distressed tone in her sleep random Chinese phrases. Absolutely terrifying the first few times experiencing it. Now, I just pull her in close and cuddle with her hard when it happens. Number 44. In the middle of the night, my girlfriend once said, "We need to decapitate them and take them back to the lab." Number 45. My significant other informed me one morning that he had woken up in the middle of the night with my face inches from his, my finger in his ear, and I was apparently whispering, "I just need to get in. Let me in." Number 46. One night, my girlfriend said in her sleep, "Are you texting demons?" And then before I could even turn over and look at her, in a high-pitched laugh, she said, "You're friends with demons." Number 47. My significant other said she was going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. On her way back, I said, "He's following you," and didn't say anything else. Number 48. I'm the sleep talker, and the scariest that I've ever been told about is when I screamed, "No, none of them have heads." Number 49. My girlfriend never sleep talks, but one night she randomly said, clear as day, "Put it away now." I had nothing out, and I was just laying in bed in the middle of the dark room. Number 50. Initially, he would just mumble something I couldn't understand. He turned around to face him and asked him what he had said. He responded in his sleep, "Don't worry about it," and then laughed in this villainous way that I've never heard him use while awake. It honestly creeped me out.
Good evening all, and welcome. Are demons just the work of science fiction? Are they all made-up stories to scare children at night? Maybe, or maybe not. Are they real? Can they possess you? And can they wreak havoc on your life to an extent that knows no end? It's time to find out, and let the darkness take control. This story took place when I was 17, Christmas of 2015. For 2 weeks, my dad and I had decided to spend Christmas with our family, as I have always dreamed. He booked our tickets, and 2 months later we were on a plane to London, England. After an 8-hour plane ride, we were safely in London. Despite my anxiety, my uncle was there to drive us to the countryside, which took about 4 hours overall, as we ended up visiting family on the way to the countryside, food stops and toilet breaks. We finally made it to Helston, Cornwall. For the remainder of the 2 weeks, I would be staying alone with my wonderful grandparents, and my dad would be staying with his brother and his brother's now ex-wife. Most of what I remember from the trip was exploring Helston and Truro, eating a lot of Walker's crisps, illegally drinking alcohol in pubs because nobody ever asked for my ID, and going clothes shopping. I remember getting an eerie feeling almost the moment I got there. I had felt that way when I was at my grandparents' house 2 summers before that, and the many other homes I visited, and plenty of those homes are fairly old. I remember falling asleep many times, and I had this unnerving notion that someone was staring at me, or these random brushes of cold air when I would be laying in bed or making food in the kitchen. I never mentioned anything. If I ignored it, it would go away. Right? Well, you're dang right. It didn't. I felt safer with my door closed, because it felt like something was standing down that short but dark hallway leading to the living room. I would hear random noises almost every night, but I put it up to the fact that maybe I was just hearing my grandparents talk in their sleep, or because the house was old, that the house was settling or some other stuff. Despite the weird feelings, I was getting almost 24/7. I tried to ignore it, and did so successfully a few times. It all came to head when on New Year's Eve I returned home at around 2:50 a.m. I was really hungry, as my cousins threw a frozen pizza in the oven, and I wouldn't touch that stuff. I had had a few beers earlier on in the night, and I had 2 after midnight, so me seeing things wasn't out of the realm of possibility. I got this craving for a ham sandwich, but the rest of my beers in my room dressed in my pajamas, and went to the kitchen. Besides the kitchen was this little sunroom that would lead out back. There was a top level and a bottom level. The top level was open, but my grandparents were keeping the bottom level locked, as it was far too cold, and the heating was practically non-existent in the bottom level. The kitchen was lit up, but the top level of the sunroom was almost completely dark. As I was making my sandwich, I casually looked to the right. As I was buttering my bread, in the corner of my eye, I saw what looked like a tall yet hunched over figure. At first, I believed that I was just being paranoid, put my stuff back in the fridge, and when I turned, the figure was still there. Anyone who listens to this, if you've ever played Left 4 Dead, does anyone remember the witch? Well, this strange, shadowy creature looked like a dark, tall version of the witch. I couldn't make out any noticeable facial features, only a bony figure with long and bony fingers. The creature had long, almost stringy hair. It was almost as if the lights were beginning to dim just by the creature being there, and I swear it was somehow moving closer, but I hadn't seen one of its ginormous legs move once. I could feel my heart beating incredibly fast, just as it is now while I remember this, because I can still remember the feeling, and I still fear that I will see that creature again. I turned my fat ass around, sandwich in hand, and ran into my room. I felt a little nauseous and could barely finish my sandwich. I just wanted to go to bed, so that it could be daylight once again, and that if I was going to be killed, I'd hopefully be asleep if any strange demon decided it wanted me as a snack or something. I was going to be sleeping there for 2 more nights. I just had to get past it and stay strong. I didn't see that creature again during the rest of my stay there. I tried to get out of that house as much as I could, and was successful in doing so. The last creepy thing that happened when I was laying in bed at around 4 a.m. was we had a flight at 12, so I had to be up early for the long drive, and since the weather was abysmal, we wanted to leave early. I remember talking to my friend on Facebook, and I was talking about how scared I was of the flight. She told me I was going to be fine, that I wasn't going to die, and that I would get home safely in no time. When she told me that I wasn't going to die, I was like my body was being taken over, and I said out loud, "But I'm already dead." I told my dad what happened a few days after we got home. He said that maybe I saw the angel of death or something. I have no clue. I was, and still am, extremely freaked out, as it might just be one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had, with something that was clearly paranormal. The only reason I think it's real is because usually when I'm drunk or tipsy, I don't tend to take much notice of things. But when I saw this thing, it was like I had been snapped back to reality, and I couldn't even feel the alcohol I had been drinking before this moment. I'm sure there must be some sort of explanation. Perhaps I was just still feeling the effects of the alcohol, or maybe I was tired, and all of it just added up to a very creepy hallucination. Or maybe something more. It was the fall of 2009. My fiancée and I had been living in our 1953 bungalow for a few months. She had been complaining that something had been messing with her at night, touching her face, her feet, sitting on her chest. One night, she ran out of the bedroom screaming, saying that it was messing with her again, and that she saw a tall shadow figure. I blew her off. I'd had plenty of my own paranormal experiences since I was 10, and I didn't want any more. But then about 2 weeks later, I went to bed late. She was already asleep. I climbed into bed and looked over my shoulder towards the bathroom door. There stood a 7-foot shadow figure. I immediately tried to debunk it by looking at the light coming from under the door from the living room. The bathroom light was not on, and there was foil over the windows since I worked nights and slept during the day. I then looked back towards it. It was standing there motionless. Next, I glanced to the left of it, at our closet. It was a large walk-in, with a green tapestry hanging on a rod for a door. The light was on the inside, and what did I see? Floating in the closet was a demon. It had scales like reptiles. Its arms were outstretched, with thumbs pointing down. It was rotating its head to the left and right. The best I could describe its face was hissing or seething. It had no legs, floating from the waist up. I watched it for a few seconds, just long enough to notice every detail of its skin and face. Then I laid down and immediately fell asleep. I am not religious and have never had any thoughts of demons before this moment. I witnessed 2 terrifying beings right before my eyes. Why did I just lay down and go to sleep? I think it had control over my mind. Sure, I've been to war a few times, but I'm not that brave. I later began to think maybe a jinn attached itself to me when I was in Iraq. I've had issues with extreme anger, rage, depression, and anxiety ever since, to the point of an arrest. It's weird because I'm actually into Buddhism, meditation, and helping people, but there's the other side of me now. If anyone had ever seen a demon like this, I'd love to get in touch. I'm now going through a divorce. In the last month of our relationship, I noticed on 2 occasions that my ex-wife's pupils were slit like a reptile or a cat. In our 10 years, I have never been afraid to say anything to her, but for some reason in those 2 moments, I didn't say a word. When my grandma was very sick, my parents decided to move closer to her in order to help treat her and make sure that she was comfortable during her final days. However, her final days seemed to drag on a bit longer than we'd all anticipated, and seeing that she was going to live for longer than we thought, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong, my parents decided to sell their old house and to live in hers. Her house was very large. It was the house that my father had grown up in, and it had been standing strong for at least 150 years. This was in rural England, and me and my parents liked the change of scenery and change of pace. However, there was something that always creeped me out: the basement. I never liked going down there. I never had any reason to. It was a very small, dark room, and didn't really have stairs, as they were rotting and old, and you had to be very careful as you treaded down if there was something that you needed to retrieve. For the most part, it was mostly used to store wine. That's what my grandma used it for anyway. I think it appeared to be more of an afterthought, as it was bricked up, but it was damp, and you could smell the earth around you. I never felt comfortable. However, as we moved in, my parents needed a place to store some old boxes, and so that's where they put them. It was on a typical Sunday that I was bored, and my dad told me to go find one of his power tools, as he was trying to fix one of the door hinges. When asking where it was, he told me that it was in the basement in one of the boxes. I really didn't want to go, and asked if my sister could go at my place. But she being 6 years old, he really didn't trust her with any of these tools. So, down I went into the darkness in search for these tools. I turned on the light, which barely illuminated the small space, and started digging around the boxes for the tools. That's when something caught my eye. Something reflecting off one of the stones. I pushed the light, which was dangling from a wire, a little bit closer to see if I could check out what this thing was. The sparkle had me excited. Money? Could it be money here? I couldn't see it well enough though. The illumination was too poor. So I quickly found my dad's power tool and told myself that I would be back to try and see what this mystery could hold. Upon returning a few minutes later with a decent torch, the light showed that it was indeed something metal. I tried pulling at it, to no avail. I was starting to pull at it, with no avail. Clearly, whatever it was sealed solidly into the wall. And that was it. I couldn't get to it, and I forgot all about it. Then a few years passed. I had grown up a fair amount. I was now 17, and my grandma at this point had passed away. But we ended up inheriting the house, and after paying off the tax, we were living there very happily. Me, my sister, my mother, and my father. It had taken some time to get used to the new environment, but this was now our home. One year, we had some particularly bad floods, and the basement flooded. Everything there was ruined, and 17-year-old me had the task of getting rid of everything that had been soaked. We managed to get all the water out, and we were considering just sealing it up. As we were debating this, I went down and made sure that I retrieved everything so that it could all be disposed, and to check on the off chance that anything was salvageable. I wasn't sure about the wine. My dad couldn't tell if water had got in or not, so sadly all of that had to be disposed of. But that's when I saw it again. The shiny thing in the wall. I hadn't been back here in a long time. I hated the basement, so I had no reason to. And that's when I wondered if this time I could pull it. So, with everything being so wet, and apparently the cement being weakened, I gave it a tug, and stronger 17-year-old me felt some movement. This caused genuine excitement. I started pulling it, and it became very clear that it was behind the brickwork. I started playing around, and after retrieving a knife from the kitchen, it was very, almost too easy to start taking the bricks apart by chipping away at the old cement. That is when I found it. Hidden behind here was a box, a metal tin. It was sealed, and sealed very well, might I add. When I managed to finally take the lid off, that I discovered what was hidden inside. An old Ouija board, as well as a few coins, notes, a die, and a few other bits and bobs. These must have been games. But why would anyone put games in a tin and bury them behind a wall in the basement? This left me very confused, but I was happy with my loot. Now bear in mind, me and my family were never raised religious, and I in no way believed in anything supernatural. These were just games. I mean, you had some classics there on paper, but the board was made out of solid wood. It was sturdy and looked the real deal. You could tell how old it was. So I invited my friends over a few days later to muck around with it. Fortunately for me, it was one of the days when my dad had to take my sister to a dance competition, and my mother, being the supportive mother she was, went with them, which left me and the house alone. It was your typical Friday evening. I invited the boys round, and we decided to have a go on the Ouija board. We tried to just muck around at first, pretending to be all spooky and creepy. We fetched a glass from the kitchen, put our fingers on it, and started saying, in a creepy and almost mocking tone, If anyone's there, we invite you. Ooh! Like that. Silly, I know. I'm sure we must have offended something. We waited to see if there was any movement, but there was nothing. When we were about to give up, though, did movement start slowly coming through. Each of us, of course, thought that it was one of our friends making the glass move, but alas, we all denied it. One of the friends was writing everything down, and towards the end, we had a friend writing everything down, and whilst playing our Q&A, we established that we were talking to Sam, and Sam was not very happy. He just said no to most of our questions. We really weren't understanding it. We asked him where he died, and he just said no. We asked him if he was dead, and he just said no. And we asked him if he would like to continue talking to us, and only then did he say yes. We tried asking him how old he was, but there'd never be a reply. We were a bit creeped out by now, although I personally believed it was definitely Barry. Barry was always a joker. So the session concluded without much information. We weren't really happy and moved on to a different game. Bear in mind, we never said hello and we never said goodbye. So I'm not really sure how that works. Apparently it means we left the session open, and I think that was our mistake. The rest of that night was uneventful, but when I went to bed that evening, I had this heavy and oppressing feeling that was covering all my body. I tried to go to sleep, but felt really uncomfortable, and resorted to turning the light on in order to sleep all night. It gave me the comfort I needed to wake up happy in the morning, but it was still there. It felt like something was wrong. I tried telling myself I was just creeped out, that I was playing with this silly board and that it was getting to me, and that I should just move on. The feeling didn't go away, but as long as I remember, I tried putting it to the back of my mind. A few weeks later, I told myself that it had to do with the board, and put it up on eBay as an authentic Ouija board, which I thought could fetch a pretty penny, but only managed to get me about £25. Not that bad. I was just glad to be rid of it, to be fair. But the feeling never went away. That's when the apparitions started. I started seeing a shadow, some kind of weird smoke creature, standing at the foot of my bed at night. I'd be unable to move, and it would just be there staring at me. There'd be times when I would come into my room in the middle of the night, and look in and turn the light on, and in that split second before the light went on, would I see the creature of shadow in a corner of the room, or on the ceiling. But the moment the light switch flicked on, it would be gone. I was scared that I was going insane, that my mind was being consumed by this primal fear of that stupid board, but I tried to be stronger than it. The apparitions didn't cease though. Nay, they started to become more commonplace. I started losing sleep, and when I was dozing off at school, just at the point before I knew that I was going to pass out, did I see it. It was right by my teacher. This black, grey, smoke thing. This figure, just looming around, haunting me. I didn't know what to do. There was a girl in my class who was really into Wicca, and I tried telling her about it. I also thought she was really hot, and wanted to ask her out, and thought this would be the perfect segue into it. Clever 17-year-old me, trying to impress a Wicca girl by telling her that I think I'm being possessed by a demon, or at the very least, stalked by one. I told her about it, and she was intrigued, and told me a few things I should do to keep it at bay. She told me that I should burn sage. I didn't even know what sage was. That was quite hard to come by anyway. But I tried it, and it worked for a little while. But when I got bored, or lazy and stopped doing it, did the thing resurface, and it would be there again. It started to get incessant. I was becoming really, really paranoid, scared that every time I'd look in a dark space it would be there, sometimes even a light space. I just wanted this thing to be gone. So, I resorted to going down to the local church one day, and banged on the church door until someone came out. It was a priest, and I told him that I wasn't religious, but that I needed help. He listened to me, but basically dismissed me and told me to go home. I didn't know who to turn to. At this point, the girl that I'd been talking to, the Wicca one, had become my girlfriend, and we'd started to get really close to each other. She started seeing the thing as well when she'd stay over. Not that my parents knew she'd stay over, and she began to become frightened for my safety and well-being. She spoke to some of her Wicca friends, and basically got another board. She said that maybe the best thing to do would be to say goodbye and finish the session. She and I joined hands, lit some candles, and requested to speak to Sam. Sam answered, and it was the stereotypical no to every question, but did say that it was him, or at least I hoped. We asked if he would please leave, and he said no. When we asked why he was haunting us, he never gave a reply. I said as loud and forcefully as I could, I'm genuinely not sure where it came from, but I screamed at the top of my lungs, Sam, you are not welcome. You're not welcome here, you're not welcome in my home, and I condemn you by the grace of God to go back from whence you came. And then I dragged the cup up to goodbye and ended the session. Clever me thought that would be the end of it, and for the most part, it was. Quite boring, I know. I'm gonna be honest, I felt like quite a badass, telling a demon to go do one, and that I wanted to live my life freely. Things did crop up here and there, shadows, things moving by themselves, but I got sleep and never saw the apparition full scale like that again. Maybe I opened a doorway to something. Maybe I could now see things that others couldn't. I don't really know how to describe it. All that I know is that life for the most part almost went back to normality. Me and the girl actually ended up getting married, and this piqued my interest in the occult and the paranormal. I don't know what would have happened to me if I'd have never met her and found a way to try and put this at bay. But I am happy with my life now and how things have turned out. I do have to be grateful though, as this experience made me who I am today. But still, it's not something I would ever dabble in again. I saw a demon 12 years ago. I had recently been arrested and had posted bail. I had thoughts of suicide, despair, hopelessness. I was asleep and woke up in the middle of the night. At the end of my bed was a beautiful woman with long red hair. She just stood there looking at me, and her hair seemed to float around her, as if she were in water. There was no noise, and I was speechless as to why such a beautiful woman was in bed with me. She smelled sweet. In a blink, her eyes went black. Her hair disappeared, and her face sunk into itself, as if I were looking at a long dead person. The room smelled of earth, electricity, and rotting wood. She jumped up and floated in my room. Then she screamed. The sound vibrated my toes, and was so loud it was the sound of fear, of hate, and disgust. I, being a 30-year-old male, hid under the sheets until the scream stopped. Then an earthquake hit. I live in Indiana, and there are never any earthquakes here. And she was gone. I started going to church regularly the next day, and have never stopped. I've never seen her again, and never felt an evil presence in that way either. I have never known fear like that, and I pray I never will again. Hand to God this happened. I keenly remember every minute of that event. About 10 years ago, though I remember this like it were yesterday, I was visiting San Francisco with a couple of friends. We were staying in the attic of my friend's son in the Castro. It was somewhat late at night, maybe 10 p.m., and we were just chilling in the attic, 3 of us. Lights dimmed, so my friend was texting someone on her phone, and every time her phone lit up, a demonic figure would appear behind her, clear as day, almost hovering or hunched over her. He was standing right at me with a huge smile. Sometimes he was laughing, but there was no sound. I interpreted him as evil based on general appearance and demeanor. He was mocking me, mocking my fear. Our eyes were locked, and I was in complete disbelief. When her phone dimmed, he vanished. When it lit back up, there he was. I was completely terrified yet silent. I kept expecting him to disappear, and for me to realize it was an illusion. But that never happened. I had to finally break the eye contact to tell my friend about him. She freaked out, stood up, and started crying, and proceeded to call her parents, who then prayed on speakerphone in the room. Appearance. Almost just like a middle-aged man, but painted red. Weird, I know, but he was glistening a bright red color. He was bald, and had a very stereotypical demonic appearance. His laugh was extremely creepy, but again, inaudible. I can't believe not only that it happened, but that I've gone so long without digging deeper for answers. Recently, the topic of ghost sightings came up, and I told this story, only to realize I've never come to terms with it. I'm very eager to hear people's perspectives, and also, I'm a little afraid if I can summon him back if I think too much about him. This is not satire. I'm not looking for your fake online attention or internet points, nor would I waste my time. I believe that there is something supernatural happening to me. Either that, or I'm developing schizophrenia. Let me go back to the start. About 10 years ago, I was in a very dark place. I was becoming a sociopath. Yada yada, crappy childhood. Anyway, I never believed in God, or at the least, the stereotypical man in the sky with a beard. Obviously, whatever God is, it's far more powerful and far smarter than some petty, angry God who actually cares about the clothes that people wear and who they sleep with. But there was a divine power that has always been indisputable. Anyway, I hated everyone, myself most of all. I don't remember it exactly, but at some point I found myself praying to the divine that I would do anything to not be me, and not in a good way. As I said, I was in a very dark place. The divine I was praying to was not loving. I wanted power more than anything, and as insane as this sounds, I felt energy go through me, like goosebumps, but on the inside. Not adrenaline either. It's completely different. Ever since then, I've been able to temporarily make this feeling flow through my body, but I have to go to a dark place or to meditate. That's not the interesting part. This started about 4 years ago. I had matured quite a bit since then, and I was not nearly as dark and unhappy as I used to be, and very occasionally used mushrooms, LSD, and DMT, all in less than 10 times for everything. I was living with my grandparents at the time, And they are your stereotypical Christian old-school grandparents. I was smoking a bowl at my house while my grandparents were at work. They never came home before 5. It was somewhere around noon, when I was smoking, that I heard a loud bang coming from my shed. I understood immediately that I needed to stop and go inside. So, I did. Not 1 minute later, my grandmother pulled in, because she had forgotten her phone. Ever since then, occurrences just like this happened to me. One time I needed a Ziploc bag, and when I opened my door to my room, there was a Ziploc bag right on the ground in front of it. Now, whenever I'm about to make a bad decision, I can hear certain noises. Not noises in my head, but if there's a sharp cracking noise to my right side, such as a water bottle crinking, or a pen rolling to hit the floor, just any high-pitched noise, I know the decision that I'm about to make is not a good one. If I hear a train before I make a decision, it's always, every single time, has led to a positive outcome. Sometimes, I'll wish for something to happen when I'm stressed out. For instance, I was doing landscaping for my uncle, and I was basically just shoveling gravel into a wheelbarrow and moving it for 8 hours for 3 days. Yes, I was being a little brat about it. I just begged for anything to happen to me so that I could get out of it. 30 minutes later, my father arrived and told me my other uncle had overdosed on heroin, and that we were leaving to go see everyone. I've even started seeing figures out of the corner of my eye. Sometimes I'll see a tracer, or experience microplasia. I've experienced a green flash. I get random visions of an eyeball when I close my eyes sometimes. I once woke up at about 3 a.m. and was seeing visions of my cat. I could feel it outside the room, wanting me. My cat was sitting right there waiting for me when I opened the door. These occurrences happen frequently now. Maybe because I've learned to see the signs, or maybe because I'm slowly losing my mind. All of this could be coincidence. All of it could be in my head. But I don't think so. I feel like it's a demon, but not in a bad way. I'm not afraid of it. I've tried to talk to it, but I always lose focus when I try. I do hear something speak to me when I focus and try, but never more than a few seconds. Even when I meditate and clear my mind, it's the same story. Did I summon a demon when I was younger? I offered my soul for power. That seems like a pretty bad idea to me looking back now. Any advice, any experts, anything like that would be much appreciated. This is coming from someone I know. A few years back, he was on his deathbed in the hospital. He had cat scratch fever, but one of those rare cases of it, so he said. He was praying out to God to save him from death, because he had been told he had just a few days left to live, and he said that he felt like God wasn't going to answer his prayers. So he said, "I don't care who saves me, but I want someone to." Then this lady in a black dress with a crow on her shoulder suddenly appeared at the foot of the hospital bed. He said he knew right away that she was a demon. She told him that she would save/heal him, if he would believe in her, and he said he would. He then described that she came to the side of his bed, reached into his chest, and he said he felt her grab his heart and squeeze it for a few seconds, as binding pain covered him, and then she disappeared. When the doctors came to check back in on him, they found him fully recovered. He says that he sees this demon every Halloween, and that she sometimes is surrounded by dogs, either standing beside or in front of her. I don't have any more information about that. I've tried looking it up, but haven't found anything. Ever since I was a kid, I was prone to seeing things. ghosts, some unexplainable creatures. I sleepwalk and say some confusing weird things. My mother has noticed it a lot, and my friends have mentioned it many times. I am super empathetic and can feel energy. It affects me a lot. So I've been seeing this humanish creature in my dreams. He is extremely tall, well-dressed, and terrifyingly handsome. His eyes are some unnatural color, and frankly, as soon as I wake up, I forget his face. A few months ago, I started seeing him outside my dreams. I woke up at 3 or 4 a.m. for no reason, and start seeing him either standing near the end of my bed or on my mirror. He just stares at me, and then he walks out or disappears, and the place where he usually stands feels cold all the damn time. It keeps happening. I wouldn't say I'm extremely scared, curious even. His energy feels inviting, yet terrifying. Well, last night I saw him again. My mother was sleeping in my room. He was standing near the mirror once more. I got up, put on my robe, and walked up to him. He is extremely tall. I could barely reach his shoulder at 5'7". I tried to touch him, and he reached out his hand and I blacked out and woke up in my bed. I figured it was just a crazy dream. But then my mother mentioned how I was murmuring about a man standing near the mirror, and heard me get up while she was half asleep. I'm not on any medication or hallucinogenic drugs. I don't drink often, and consider my mental health to be relatively healthy, except for the occasional panic attacks. Am I going insane? Is it a demon? A ghost? How can I contact it? I am not making this up. Frankly speaking, I wish I was. I am just very confused, and would appreciate some proper answers. I know it sounds stupid, but I can hear and see demons. I can't see them face to face, but what I can do is see their reflection in TVs, mirrors, and windows. The one I see in the reflection of most wears a black cloak and looks very old, so you can't see his face because the cloak is covering it up, and he has sharp nails that look like razors. He has a hunchback, which makes him stand and sit weird, and he has a voice of a man in his 30s that smokes. This one isn't that mean, and the most he says to me is, "What are you doing? And how are you?" in his low voice, but it's nothing bad. The other one I've never seen, but I've heard it speaking to me. It was around 4 in the morning, and I just got a new dog, and we had her in her cage out in the mudroom, where we put our shoes on. She was pounding inside her cage and crying, but I don't know how to open her cage door, so I couldn't let her out, and after a little bit, I heard a loud
I believe my support for Trump has affected my entire life, but modeling in particular, it's...
At that point, I almost crapped myself, and ran up my stairs back to my room, and I heard my dog getting louder, and hear her barking and banging and crying. I have bad dreams about them, such as this one I vividly remember, where I was at the bottom of my stairs and I was taking a timed photo on my phone, which would make it take multiple photos, since I have an iPhone. But when I looked back at them, I saw this black shadow crawling down my stairs after me, and it looked nothing like the one I can see in the reflection of it, and it chased me around until I woke up. About 2 days later, I had a dream about it again, where there was a black shadow inside my closet that I was trying to keep inside, but at the end, he got out and started crawling after me, and then I woke up. I know it sounds crazy, but it is all true. There is a known demon house in my area, and I assume that by passing this is where it first attached to me. This demon first manifested itself to me when I was 13. and followed me pretty consistently until I was 17. It could never physically get to me. Something was mostly keeping it at bay. There was never physical harm. It just attacked my psyche. I believe I was born with psychic gifts, medium and clairvoyancy. But the longer the demon was attached, the more I lost touch with these gifts. So after a while, I hired a medium to see if I could get answers regarding the demon. And long story short, she said it was an extremely powerful one, and she refused to speak to it. So I never learnt its name. But she informed me the reason it couldn't get to me was because an ancient ancestor who was a warlock kept him at bay. With all that said, I still saw this demon in my dreams and in dark hallways. It always wore a black cloak. Occasionally there were things coming from its shoulders. I assumed those were wings, and it had dark red eyes. Now I've never been able to get answers on this. Any help would be much appreciated. Another thing it did, it would make me see things, such as rows of shadows on both sides of the road at night, watching me. I haven't seen it in 3 years, but I do still feel it. My family has a weird thing with always having ghosts around us. Not sure why, it's always just been that way. My sister has been seeing this one figure for a long time. She said it has chalky white skin with black eyes. She sees it around a lot. It has round ears and a round head. We call it Monkey because it kind of looks like one. She has a lot of dreams, a few I can remember her telling me, about being almost always about to get her killed. One time, she saw herself bloated and dead. Multiple times have had to do with knives. And others, she saw the basic idea of the devil. If you don't know, but you know something or someone that could help, I'd appreciate it. I really don't know who to turn to. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Special thank you to each and every one of my patrons. Your help, of course, means the world to me, and it really helps in keeping the channel going, and all the other stuff that goes along with it. If you're interested in becoming a patron too, you can find the link in my description to have your name on here in a future video. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, please do not forget to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts, as they always help. If there's a story that you wish to share, feel free to send it to my Reddit or my email. And hey, are you subscribed yet? Because you definitely should. Don't forget to press the bell icon to be notified of your nightly spooks also. But anyway, for now guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay safe, make sure those demons don't possess you, and I'll see you in the next one. To preface this, I want to say, last year, I spent about 32 days in the woods, either scouting, hunting, or fishing. The year before that, I spent about 22 days. This doesn't include my regular hunts and camping adventures, which, in the past 3 years, adds up to just over 100 days. I've been hunting since I was 9. And have spent a lot of time outdoors, in various different parts of the USA and in Canada. I've seen and heard a lot of strange shit, but this one takes the cake. I was in Cohutta, North Georgia wilderness, for 7 days scouting for bears, wild hogs, and deer, prepping for a hunting trip later that year. I had hiked in about 10 miles, and then went off trail for another 3 to 5. Basically, I was out in the middle of nowhere. Since I was alone, I was using a hammock that has a built-in bug net. and I had a rainfly over it. I spent about 3 days halfway up a mountain, just looking for a good place to hunt. I saw 3 to 4 good-sized bears, about 10 hogs, and ran across a few good-sized deer. On the 4th day, I was going to head down to a small stream that I had marked on my GPS, and then set up camp, restock on water, and prep for the 2-day hike back. I could have gone faster, but I wanted to be able to look for any animal signs along the way. As I was approaching this small stream, I noticed a tent, which I was excited to see, as I had been completely alone for a few days, and it's always nice to run into another hiker. Generally, us wilderness folks are pretty down to earth, and as I got closer, I couldn't have been too far from where the camp was. So I set up my camp about 30 yards away, and with about 4 hours of daylight left, started cooking some dinner. 2 hours later, I started to wonder where this person was, given that I was in the wilderness and it was over a day hike out. There wasn't much I could do, but I did hike around the site, making a circle as I went out, to try and look for any signs of a struggle in case there had been a bear attack, or maybe they had an injury. I got about 1/4 mile out from the campsite, walking in a circle, and found nothing, much to my relief. As night came, no one showed. I started a fire in hopes that the person would be able to find where they'd set up and have some light. Fires burn really bright and are very easy to see from far away. After eating, searching, and hoping that the person was going to make it back, I called it a night. I had a small flask with me and took a couple of sips of whiskey, jumped into my hammock with my pistol, and attempted to go to sleep. Now, I sleep pretty hard. I mean, really hard, regardless of where I am. It literally annoys my friends, because I can always seem to fall asleep and stay asleep, regardless of where in the world we are. But this night was different. I felt like something was off, but I figured it was just me worrying about this person, who, by all my accounts, was completely missing. So for the first time in my life, I woke up to the sound of what I thought were footsteps, but not in the sense of footsteps on leaves, but what a heavy-footed person might make walking on an old wood floor. It was extremely loud. I got my gun, grabbed my headlamp, and stored it in a small compartment above me, and waited to see if it would stop. Right at that moment, it did. Then I saw something that scared the shit out of me. On my rainfly, the gleam of a flashlight, faint but there. I shouted, "Hello?" And right when I did, it sounded like 10 people suddenly began running away from me in every direction. I dropped out of my hammock to the ground, grabbing my gun and frantically turning on my headlamp, shining it all around me. But I didn't see shit. My heart was racing pretty badly, but I thought it might have just been the reflection of the moon on the rainfly. Yeah, that was it. And those footsteps running away were probably all the armadillos. As much as I tried to convince myself of my own utter lunacy, the problem was that there was no moon. I'd never seen an armadillo above 2,000 feet, and for some reason, the campsite I set up by was gone. The fire had been put out by water, and it was apparent because there was not a damn coal in that thing. I thought for sure it was 4 a.m., but I had only been asleep for an hour at this point. I wanted to leave, but hiking out in the wilderness while it's dark is always a bad idea. So I grabbed my flask, took a sip of whiskey, removed my rainfly so that I could see out of my hammock, and tried my hardest to go back to sleep. I was laying down when I saw some light hit the tree above me. It was clear it was coming from downstream, and I got out of my hammock and started yelling, "Hey, you all need help?" I got no response. I saw whatever was putting out the light, and it spun around and started heading downstream, really fast. At this point, my body had pumped through more adrenaline than it had blood, and I was exhausted from it. I finally was able to fall asleep, and woke up at around 7 a.m. When I did, I noticed that my water filter that I had left out was missing. It's a gravity filter, and it hangs on a tree filtering water down into my main bladder that I put on my backpack, and my water bladder sitting at the base of a tree. It looked like it was cut down the middle with a knife. They cut down my bear bag, which had food in it, and took some of it. The creepiest part of it all was that they went through my bag, which was right under my hammock, while I was sleeping. I checked the bear bag before, and I went back to sleep the second time, and it was still there, hanging, and my bag under my hammock hadn't been touched. I packed all my shit and hightailed it out of there, keeping my pistol close to me and moving as fast as I could. I ended up making the hike back in just under 15 hours. I hiked the trail part in the night, because I wasn't about to spend another night out there. I didn't see anyone on my hike out. There were no cars parked at the trailhead, and the DNR said they had only seen my car there. Since then, I haven't gone out there without any friends. I reported all of this to the local DNR, but they looked at me like I was crazy. About 4 years ago, I was a junior at a small college in LA County. Bordering my town was a large cavernous region known as Turnbull Canyon. It's the kind of place that has a healthy amount of creepy folklore surrounding it, with an area emphatically known as Hell's Gates. Stories of cultic activity, gang killings, abandoned mental institutions, and the like. The kind of shit you hear about any place old enough to have a reputation. In reality, most of the stories were spurned from a tragedy that occurred years prior. A woman's body was found at the base of a canyon, and from then on, the rest is history. Nevertheless, when a photographer friend asked me and another buddy to go out to the canyon with him in order to take some photos of the LA skyline, I had to oblige. The canyon was only about a 30-minute drive from our campus, and we had been listening to the King of Limbs the entire drive, which proved to be the perfect ambience to get me feeling pretty anxious about our little excursion. I should also note that I'm a pretty anxious guy in general, so travelling out to a remote area preceded by its reputation for scary occurrences admittedly had me thinking twice about the decision. At the top of the canyon, there's a small residential area, a few ritzy houses surrounded by trees and woods. In order to venture into the canyon itself, you have to follow a main trail, with several smaller arteries that split off in other directions. but ultimately culminate after a couple of miles or so. At the base of a steep hill adorned an old water tower overlooking the city. Anyhow, we parked our car at the top of the canyon road, divided up the camera gear, and made our way out to the trailhead, with it being around 1 a.m. by this point. After walking the trail for about 5 minutes, Dave the photographer decided it was time to set up his first shot, while Jeff, our other friend, and I kept watch. Eventually he got the shot he needed, and we continued walking for another 5 minutes or so before Dave decided to set up his next shot. At this point, the trailhead had disappeared behind us completely, and we were a little less than a quarter of the way to the water tower. While setting up the tripod, we noticed the faint glow of headlights off in the distance, which was strange because the trail isn't meant for cars, nor is it big enough for them to pass through. If I recall, it's only about 5 feet wide with shrubbery on both sides. This was clearly a bit of a red flag for us, as we were the only people out there. So we immediately packed up our things and ducked off into the brush, waiting for the car to pass on. Eventually, an old pickup truck idled to a stop about 50 yards from where we were hiding. The truck itself was old and rickety, sitting on a lifted chassis, the bed of which was missing entirely. Growing up in the country, I knew it as the type of truck typically owned by backwoods woodfolk, who lived in the boonies and preferred to be left out on their own devices. We watched in agonizing anticipation as the truck just idled in place for several minutes before flooring it down one of the other trails, the roar of the engine echoing throughout the canyon. Clearly, we were spooked at this point, the three of us speculating as to our next step. Jeff and I were reluctant to continue, while Dave assured us that it was probably nothing. Perhaps just a guy off-roading, as he put it. So, with great reluctance, Jeff and I trudged on behind Dave towards the water tower to get his final shots. Nevertheless, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the truck. I mean, I knew plenty of people in high school who would go off-roading for fun in the woods, but never on finicky canyon trails barely wide enough to hike on, let alone drive. It just didn't sit right with me. After walking without interference for about an hour, we finally made it out to the water tower, climbed the hill to the top, and took in the view of the city. Dave once again started setting up his equipment, while Jeff and I stood on both sides of the water tower, keeping watch just in case the truck came back. Nothing. At this point it was around 3 a.m, and Dave decided that he has gotten all the shots he needed. So we pack up our equipment and commit to heading back before it gets too late. Seeing as how all of us have class in just a few hours, just as we were preparing to descend the hill, the truck comes roaring out of the canyon below us, back onto the trail, at which point the driver attempts to climb the hill, revving the engine loudly. Scared shitless, the three of us slid off the side of the hill into the brush, clinging to plants and rocks, as the truck finally made it atop the hill, slowly driving around the tower. We could see the glow of the headlights each time it circled above us. After waiting for nearly 10 minutes, while also trying to not make any noise, the truck eventually descended the hill, stopping in the middle of the trail not more than 100 yards away. We watched as a scruffy man in his mid-50s stepped out of the idling truck and into the glow of its headlights, moseying around while looking at the ground. He then knelt down, looking at something in the dirt, surveying the area intently. As he did so, it became increasingly apparent that he was tracking something. Our footsteps. This next part chills me to the bone. As my friends and I huddled together watching in complete terror, another man, wearing a long, dark parka, emerged from the brush, right there where we had been hiking, joining the other man at his side. Apparently he had been out there the entire time we were walking the trail, just watching us, following behind us at a safe distance. The two of them talked for a long while, but we couldn't hear a word. They continued scanning the area, looking for our footprints, but eventually got in the truck and drove off down one of the forks in the trail. We sat in silence for a long time, waiting nearly 2 hours just to ensure the coast was clear, at which point we made like hell back to the car, down the canyon, and back to our campus, just in time for class. This story happened to me 10 years ago. At the time, I was jobless, and I found a job as a security guard in an office building. But the office building was in a forested area, away from any busy streets, secluded. The person who had the job before me had a car accident, and apparently, and unfortunately, was paralyzed from the waist down. Nobody was interested in the job, since you worked during the night in an office building that was huge, and it was just a boring as hell job. But I needed the money, and a job was a job. Once I started, a supervisor worked me in for a week. So, this was my first night working by myself. I came to work and took the shift over from my colleague at 9 p.m. He told me there were still some people left in the building. Before I went up to the 15th floor, I closed the main entrance in such a way you can only exit when you're inside, so that no outsiders could come in beyond this point. After I did this, I went to the 15th floor where these people were still at work, to ask them if they needed to go anywhere else in the building, because if not, I could make my rounds and close off all the other floors, which I did. So I made my rounds and found nothing in particular. I returned to the front desk, and it was around 11:30 p.m. and the last people who were working on the 15th floor were just leaving. And the last person to leave was a guy who wished me a good night. Once everyone was gone, I went back up to the 15th floor, checked all the offices, and locked it down. I went down to my front desk again, since there were no people left. I turned on the alarms, which work via motion detection, and also when you open a fire exit. I did this on every floor except the ground floor, because that was where my desk was. Within 5 minutes that I activated the alarms on all floors, the alarm went off on the 10th. There was supposed to be no one in the building. The rule is, if an alarm goes off, you first call the security company before you take any action. I told them I would investigate the alarm, and I would call them back once I checked it out. Otherwise, if I didn't call back, they would send a police car to check it out, just as a precaution. I checked the whole 10th floor, and I found nothing. I went back to call the security company, telling them it was a false alarm. I kid you not. The alarm on the 10th floor went off 7 times in the hour, and every time I checked the floor, I couldn't find anything out of order, or even that there was someone there. Since this was my first day working alone, and the alarm went off so many times, the security company just assumed I was screwing stuff up, and wanted to file a complaint to my boss, which would mean I would lose my job that I had only had for a week. Great. In retrospect, the following was the dumbest thing I could ever do, because the alarm went off again. I didn't want to call the security company again and cry wolf. I just went up to the 10th floor without informing them. The only thing I had on me was a maglite, since security guards in the Netherlands are not allowed to carry guns. So I went up to the 10th floor, checked the floor, and as before found nothing. The only difference now was that I pretended to leave, turned off the lights, and stayed on the 10th floor, listening to see if someone was there. In about 5 minutes, I heard someone or something moving. I was relieved and anxious at the same time. Relieved I wasn't wrong, and that there was nothing on this floor, and anxious because of what was on the floor. I turned on the light and tried to sound as manly as possible, saying something to the line of, "I know there's someone in here, show yourself." And as you can imagine, no response. I was so stupid not to go down and call for help. But stupid me went looking to whatever it was I heard on the 10th floor. So I walked into the office that I heard the sound from, turned on the light, and found a little girl who couldn't be older than 13, with long brown hair, in white pajamas, squatting and rocking front to back on a desk, looking straight at me. The scary thing was that there was no emotion in her face nor her eyes, and I was almost shitting myself. This is the typical scene from every film I've ever seen, where the protagonist discovers the horrifying thing taunting him right before his imminent demise. Keeping this in mind, I collected my nerves and took the girl by the hand. Like, what can a small girl do to a 6'8" tall guy? Am I right? No. I took her down to the front desk, offered her a Coke, but she didn't respond at all. The only thing I could do was call my supervisor and told him about what I encountered. My supervisor's response was, "Stay there, we'll be right over." I hung up the phone with my supervisor, and while we were waiting, I just had this feeling from this girl that there was something really wrong with her. Before my supervisor showed up, he called me and told me to call an asylum, which was pretty close to the office building I worked at, just to verify if someone was missing or not. Why would there be a 13-year-old girl in an office building with no houses nearby at all? So that's what I did. I called the asylum and inquired if there was someone missing, and I got the scariest response of all. They told me, yes, as a matter of fact, someone is missing. I gave them a description of the girl sitting next to me, and it was in fact the girl who was missing. They told me that she was extremely dangerous, and that I should watch my back at all costs. They immediately sent people over to take the little girl with them. A week later, my supervisor told me the story of the girl I found, since he spoke with the people from the asylum. It turns out that this small girl killed her mother, her father, and her brother whilst they were sleeping, when she was 11. Even in the asylum, she wounded herself and fellow members of staff, either by stabbing them with a pencil, or, in another case, biting a piece of someone's ear off. To this day, we still have no clue how she entered the building. Maybe as someone was leaving, The door stayed open long enough for her to dart in and sneak up through the stairs. Or I don't know. Either way, we checked all the cameras and there was absolutely no footage of her ever entering the building. I lived in New Mexico for several years before moving to the Midwest. My friend Amy and I, who are both females, would spend many days exploring the remote corners of New Mexico, discovering abandoned ghost towns and enjoying the quiet, desolate beauty of the desert. One afternoon in March 2010, we were traveling from Ruidoso to Albuquerque, always up for exploring. We took a back road rather than traveling the more direct highway. One leg of our journey had us on NM55. It's a remote, teeny tiny 2-lane highway. We loved those type of roads, up until that day. This part of New Mexico is flat and desolate desert. You can see for miles, and there is virtually nothing except dirt and rock between towns, and towns can be miles apart. So we were on NM55 going north, and after a few minutes, we saw a white pickup truck ahead of us going in the same direction. Suddenly, he stopped his truck sideways in the middle of the highway, blocking both lanes. We were about a mile away from him, and as we got closer, we began to get uneasy. We could see no reason for him to do this. We were the only other vehicle out there, and we began wondering if we should turn around rather than come up to him and have to stop. We were about half a mile away from him when he pulled over to the opposite side of the highway. His truck was still pointing in the direction we were going, and we tried to relax a little bit. Surely this guy was a rancher or something. Maybe he was checking something on his land. As we passed him, we noticed a few things. There was only one person in the truck, a middle-aged guy who never took his eyes off us, and he was talking into a walkie-talkie. A few seconds after we passed him, he pulled back onto the highway and started following us. But he never got too close. He would always get within a few cars' lengths and then drop back a little, and then speed back up again to within a few cars' lengths. We were getting nervous, and we realized how alone we really were. We had seen no other traffic on that road, and we hadn't told anyone about this great idea we had to take a detour. We checked our cell phones, and neither one had signal, which is typical for remote New Mexico, but scary given our present situation. Amy was driving and speeding up, while I frantically checked the map, hoping to find a road that would have more traffic. There was no other road. We had to travel this one to get to the next town over, Mountain Air. Turning around to go back the other way didn't seem like a good option. After a few minutes, we saw another pickup truck coming towards us. He was going very, very slow, maybe 20 miles an hour if that. The pickup was old and beat up, whereas the one behind us was newer. Amy had us at 75 miles per hour, which wasn't typical on these 55 mile per hour highways, and we blew by the old pickup truck. As we passed it, we saw another middle-aged man who was talking into a walkie-talkie. After the white pickup truck passed him, he pulled a U-turn and began to pull up behind him. As we watched this, we could see the white pickup truck guy talking into his walkie-talkie. No doubt, these two men knew each other, and we were being now deliberately followed. and for the first time, I felt hunted. They stayed right behind us. We watched for obstacles in the road, and we truly thought the old beat-up pickup truck guys had set a trap in the road and our vehicles would be disabled somehow. We were talking about driving into fields, and we were in an SUV, but this was obviously their territory, and we were afraid of what would happen if we went off-road and got cornered. So we stayed on the highway. By now, the white pickup truck guy was right on top of us. We could see him talking into the walkie-talkie, and he stayed right on our bumper. An old beat-up pickup truck guy was right on top of him. The three of us sped down the highway. The white pickup truck inched closer. His maneuvering and edging closer made it apparent that he was trying to bump us. I watched helplessly as he got within inches of our back bumper, and Amy floored it. We were passing 80 miles an hour and edging 90. The road was flat and deserted, but if anything had gone wrong, it would have been catastrophic. We were absolutely not going to slow down or stop if we could help it. The white pickup truck pulled into the opposite lane and started to gain speed. The only thing we could think of was that he wanted to pass us to get in front. If he got in front of us, and his buddy behind us, then we'd be boxed in and trapped. We looked frantically at the rocky desert on both sides of us. Our only option was to off-road it. Should we risk it? Could we speed through the desert and make it to safety in one piece? As we topped a small incline, we saw a sign that said, Salinas Pueblo Mission National Monument, and it pointed towards a road on the left. And right at that moment, a blue pickup truck pulled out of that road onto the highway in front of us. As we came up onto the blue pickup truck, we saw the plate said, U.S. Park Service. We looked at each other and then looked behind us, and both pickup trucks did a U-turn and went the other way. We followed the blue pickup truck to Mountain Air, and then made our way to Albuquerque. I don't know exactly what these guys' intentions were, but they weren't good. There is something seriously wrong out there. I notified the state police, and they said they keep an eye on things. This area is very near Belen, New Mexico, which is where Tara Calico was abducted. It's also about 100 miles from Elephant Butte, New Mexico, which is where David Parker Ray had his little secret torture laboratory. We didn't put it all together until later. Even though David Parker Ray had died by the time this happened to us, we do believe that there are others out there who are like him. And whoever abducted Tara has never been caught. Or maybe we came into meth lab territory. But since this happened on an actual highway rather than a backcountry road, I tend to discount the meth lab theory. Whatever is going on there, one thing's for sure, it isn't good. September 2010. My boyfriend Dave, his best friend Tony, my best friend Liz and I were all coming back to our hometown for our final year of college after spending the summer in London. We had had a fantastic time, staying in my uncle's apartment, partying and exploring such a big city. It was great. We stopped in a B&B about half of the way home and were planning to get home around 6 p.m. We all woke up early, at about 4 or 5, ready to set off again, when we discovered that someone had obviously driven too close to our car and broke the right wing mirror off. Seeing as this was my dad's birthday present to me, and I'd had it barely 2 months, I was absolutely fuming. We asked the landlady where we could possibly find spares or something to use for the time being. She said she'd driven past a makeshift scrapyard or something a while back. She wasn't sure if it was still there, but she drew us a rough map and we got back on the road. I wasn't very sure she was right about her directions, because the closer we got to the area she'd circled, the more desolate the surroundings were. The roads got more difficult and had gone from stone to dirt. Around us, there weren't any farms anymore, just long, weedy grass and patches of forest. It had basically become a moor. We were about to head off because of the wild animals, and I'd just have to get over being a paranoid driver and deal without my wing mirror for this journey. When surely enough, my boyfriend pointed out in front of a handwritten sign directing us 2 miles down the road, cafe and car spares. We drove down into a little cove surrounded by forest, and all got out except for my friend Liz, who was asleep in the back seat. There was a tiny cream hut with cafe spray painted on the roof, a caravan, and a hill of metal car bits. As to be expected, we were the only visitors, and we parked up front. The sun was up, but no lights or people were around. I guessed they were still sleeping. It was about 6 in the morning after all. We all walked up to the scrap pile, and I had to fumble through looking for a wing mirror, or any sort of mirror that would do for the time being, until we could just get it repaired. Tony picked up what could be only described as at least a decade-old mirror, and suggested that we just take it and go. But me, being stupid sincere, insisted to give them money for it. I can't just take it and go. I knocked on the door and waited. A big, hard-faced man answered the door, and at first looked like he was pissed off and tired, then smiled to me a two-toothed smile. He leered at me for a few seconds, then seeing the boys approach, asked us what we wanted. Tony handed him the mirror and asked how much for it. He said nothing, just to get to know us, to which I thought was fair enough. 2 more men then left the patio doors on the other side. They turned and smiled, both skinheads with teeth like meth addicts, and they came over. They absolutely reeked. He gave them the mirror and told them to go attach it to our car. He then introduced himself as Ian, sat down on the patio chairs, and offered us some sandwiches, which I politely declined. But he insisted we must be hungry, and told me to come in, that women are best at making sandwiches. I declined again, finding him a little bit sexist at this point, and when he asked again, Dave more sternly reinforced that we didn't want to come in. Ian muttered something, and then came and sat on the chairs with us. It became awkward very quickly, as he started asking questions. It started off innocently enough, like how old we were, where we were from and where we were going, and then it became a little more uncomfortable. He asked if I had a boyfriend, to which Dave answered, and then started asking us both what we like to do to each other, how often do we have intercourse, and weird private stuff like that, to which we didn't answer. We sat in silence until we heard Liz scream. When we turned around, I saw one of the men, who was meant to be fixing the wing mirror back on, with his hand grasping Liz's leg. The other was looking around nervously behind the car. We got up immediately and sprinted off the patio. Tony running after the guys, but they both headed into the forest. Liz was hysterical. She'd woken up to find herself on her own in the car, and a man's hand running up her leg. I can't even begin to imagine how terrifying that must have felt. I got into the back seat with her and consoled her, while Dave came around the other side and got in, and told us some nails were on the floor. We looked over, and there were around 12 of them arranged around the tire, like the guy was ready to pop them. I couldn't really think why at the time, but now I wonder where they got all those car parts. We decided it was enough. We didn't want to spend any more time there, mirror or no mirror, and were ready to go when Tony was the last to get into the car. He closed the backseat door, and we looked back and saw Ian re-emerge from the house with something long in his hands, running towards us. My vision adjusted, and when he got a bit closer, it became apparent that he was holding a rifle, a goddamn hunting rifle. At that point, I actually burst into tears and hit the engine, slamming on the accelerator as hard as possible. The car started to go, and we got up to about 90, forgetting the dirt roads and just driving over whatever, until that scrapyard was out of sight. We didn't stop looking behind us until we were safely on the motorway. To this day, whenever I go to London, I will take the train instead. I am still shit scared that I will run into them again. I live in a certain Midwest city that's infamously known and scrutinized for its gang violence. No matter how great of an area my side of town is, I can't help but be hopelessly paranoid due to all of the media and how it makes one bad neighborhood seem like the entire city is horribly crime-ridden. As a result, I'm always aware of my surroundings and always on the side of caution. I nanny part-time for a family through school. It's easy, good money, and I get paid in cash. On certain days of the week, I'll pick up the little girl I nanny, take her to our after-school activity, and then come home. By the time this is completed, it's a little after 6 o'clock, and being winter, it was already pretty dark then. Their house is located in a neighborhood that used to be considered the wrong side of the tracks. About 20 years ago anyway. You'd never guess now, due to all of the high-end retailers and million-dollar houses filling the streets. It's in an interesting transitioning phase, where one block is filled with brand new mansions, and the next block over is run down and sometimes downright scary. So even though it's getting pretty affluent, you still get your fair share of riffraff and break-ins. Anyway, I've never felt unsafe or scared on their streets. It's small and not particularly well lit, but filled with families and townhouses. Their house is located at the end of a small street, and when I reach it, I see an old man standing in the driveway. He looked lost and appeared to be checking addresses. The people who live next to my family is an elderly couple from Argentina. I'd seen the man before. We call him Vovo, but really only in passing. I asked the girl I nanny if that was Vovo standing in the driveway, and she said no. He's standing in the middle of the driveway and moves to the side when he sees that I'm trying to turn in. These are all townhomes, and it's the city, so the driveways are only about a car's length off the street. I crack my window down ever so slightly. Even if he looks like an innocent old man, I'm not taking any chances. He comes up to the car and is holding up one of those large cookies you can get in a bakery at the grocery store, with frosting that reads out, "Happy Birthday." He asks me where Donna is, and that he has come to celebrate her birthday with her. He leans the cookie up, as some sort of proof. Confused, I tell him that there is no Donna that lives here, or a Donna that lives on the street that I can recall anyway, and that he must have the wrong address. He comes closer, and adamantly tells me that this is the address that he was given. I explain to him again that he must have the wrong place. Frustrated, he asks me to get out of the car and help him read the piece of paper with the address he was given. At this point, the little girl is saying, "I'm scared," from the back seat. I grew up with stranger danger, constantly drilled in my head, and I go over the same routine with her often. We have a safe word. I make sure she knows her address by heart, in case she gets lost. Never to talk to anyone she doesn't know. You know, the works. My alarms are going off. Her alarms are going off. So I slowly roll up the window and back out of the driveway without saying any more to the man. He watches as I drive away and doesn't say anything further. I turn on the next block and made my way back on the street just to check if the man was still there. Sure enough, he was, but this time a few houses down. I was still feeling odd, so I kept driving, and we stopped at a local Target, just to kind of wait out for another 30 minutes. I came back and he was gone. I assumed he had either found Donna or just given up. When I pulled into the driveway, the next door neighbor was pulling into her garage at the same time. I went out and asked her if she'd seen an old man earlier, and to my surprise she did, and our stories lined up. However, this time, Donna supposedly lived at her exact address instead of ours. We spoke to the neighbors at the end of the block,